Hello Isolation Art School. In the last video, we looked at how to see and identify negative space and how it can help you draw things in a new way. Seeing the spaces around and in between things really helps you draw accurately and find the forms you're studying. This week, we're going to take it a bit further by looking at using the idea of foreground and background used with figures and how you can transform old and unloved pieces of art by adding new imagery over the top. Stick around to the end of the video to see how you can do this. So, let's have a look at how to play about with ideas of negative and positive space, foreground and background. We're going to take a quick look at the work of Keith Vaughan. So he used this a lot in his work. He would take his photographs of men on beaches often, and he'd look at those figures and use them to put in his paintings, which really played about with line, colour, foreground and background. So where do you get your images from? You could take your own photographs, use an old photograph that you've got, or look in books or online. I found this one, which has got some great figures in to work from. So first of all, we're going to prep some backgrounds. You could use whatever colours that you like, but try and get a range of darks and lights in there, and try and get a range of different kinds of mark making, maybe different types of brush strokes. You could use watercolour, acrylics, crayons, pencils, whatever you've got, just so long as it's nice and varied. So here we go. I'm going to put a few drips in there as well. Oh, lovely. Okay, and now it's time for doing some drawing. Now, when you're drawing your figure, think about looking at the image much more than you look at the paper that you're drawing on. So don't worry if that means that your drawing is going to be a bit wibbly wobbly. We're going to work in quite a Keith Vaughan style today, which is not worrying about being too precise, not having to get everything just right, but trying to be a bit more expressive. So just enjoy drawing whilst looking intently at the photograph. There, I have speeded up a bit here. You can go a lot slower. And get that figure in, and then we're going to cut them out. And then you can start playing around with what goes underneath that stencil and how can you play about with that contrast between the two. And you've got your little figure as well, so play about with that too. What sort of background could this person go on? Contrasting colours, there we go. Now we're going to try a different way of creating a background with mark making more. So we've got a cup of coffee here, really nice colours, and then if you're lucky enough to have some of these quick inks and black ink around, you can play about with a bit of that, but obviously you can use anything you've got. Yeah, you can use things you've got in your cupboard, beetroot, soy sauce. There we go, a bit of flicks and splashes. I'm dragging the end of my paintbrush through all that lovely mix. And I've got a charcoal pencil there, which is beautiful when it's dragged through water. I've got a biro to make some thinner, more delicate kind of lines. So a real variety of darks and lights, thick and thin lines. And here's another one, and I'm going to do my drawing over the top here. So speed it up a bit, you go slower. I'm looking at one of my figures from the photograph, finding the negative spaces in the spaces between arms and legs, not worrying if it goes a bit wibbly wobbly, and cutting it out. And then you've got your silhouette, and it's time to play about with the backgrounds. Oops. And what makes a really strong and dramatic mix of the silhouette and the background. So you could try a few of these and take photographs of each. There we go, and there's your mark making figure on their background. Okay, so I'm going to look at this figure next and do our technique of painting out the background so that we leave our mark making, our painterly backgrounds that we've made in the foreground within the figure, the positive shape. So I'm mixing up a nice greeny grey here, which is a nice muted mid-tone kind of colour, the sort of colours that Keith Vaughan would like, these nice kind of muted greys, blues and ochres that he liked. So I'm painting all around the figure, going into those negative spaces there until that figure starts to emerge with all that patterning and mark making and brush strokes. There we go. And here's some other ideas for how your pieces could look. Maybe you could have multiple figures, mark making and painting. Try other things in the silhouette. Try using unexpected imagery with your silhouettes and cut figures. How does this change the meaning of your piece? Here's a painting that I did using an abstract painting I'd done, and I overlaid a new figure on top and painted out the negative space around it. I also had this tree painting that I'd done. I flipped it around and drew a figure on top, put in a few details for the face. The tree painting had never seemed finished. I was never really happy with it, but you can transform these things by incorporating new forms over the top, like with this painting. I found a lovely old photo of my mum as a child and began by sketching out the image over the top of the old painting. The negative space in between her arms helped me get the proportion of the head and the arms and the beach ball. You can see the photo there in the bottom right hand corner. It wasn't that I didn't like this abstract painting that I'd done, it's just that I hadn't actually used my ideas about negative space while I was making it, and I felt like I'd lost a lot of the form and the spaces that made me interested in it in the first place, so I thought I could transform it. My first idea was to paint over all the negative space in a bright whitish paint. But then you can see I put the photo in Photoshop and used the blending mode to create a new idea, where the background is faded in some parts and emphasised in others, using dramatic lights and darks. Photoshop has an app called Photoshop Mix now that does this for you. It's really exciting that how you can generate some new unexpected ideas, mixing your imagery together. So maybe you could try it. So here I am sort of painting over the negative space and then rubbing it back. And I'm going to start by adding in some darks and emphasising some of the bits that I like, adding in and taking away all the time, so the foreground and the background are coming in and out of each other all the time. And here's the finished piece. Okay, hope you learned something from these techniques. Have fun.